Hey everyone, welcome back to the car review series. Today we're taking a look at the 2016 Dodge Viper ACR. When picking cars for reviews, I usually scroll through your suggestions, but the reason we're looking at the Viper today is because, well, I saw one on my way home from work yesterday and realized I've never driven a Viper in Horizon 4, and that's not right. So here we are now. Let's talk about the Viper a bit here while taking it for its first stock test drive. Now, everyone has heard of the Dodge Viper. The Viper is a car that's been around for nearly 30 years now, first rolling off the show floor officially in 1992 with a V10 engine developed in part by Lamborghini and pushing 400 horsepower. In 1992, the Ferrari Testarossa that year only had 420 and cost over 3 times as much. The Viper has since kept the famous V10 in all of its cars moving forward, and the one we have here today in the ACR makes a modest 645 horsepower. Let's go ahead and listen to it. Well, if you ask me, this is a classic Forza car sound lately. There is a shadow of what the Viper's V10 is supposed to sound like, but something just gets lost in translation. There's no depth, no realism, it's just so flat and computer generated, and to me, takes away from the potential enjoyment of driving this car in-game. So I'm bummed with the sound. Let's move on to the performance. This is the Viper ACR after all, a hardcore track-focused version of the standard Viper that still holds a handful of records around tracks here in the States. And my initial impressions are very positive. I mean, look at the responsiveness and turn-in of this car. It's so quick and snappy and it just grips like mad. Probably in part because of that massive rear wing, but hey, I'm not complaining. This car has some serious potential. Right now, we're sitting a hair under the top of S1 class, but I would love to push this into S2. So let's take it to the shop and see what we've got for options here. So to start off with tire compounds, it does look like we're already running the race compound, but you can of course switch to rally or drag as well. Now as for tire widths, we only get one upgrade. They're already super fat tires though, so that makes sense. And interestingly enough, we can't even change the front rim size, just the rear. And then happily we do have track width options. Definitely will be taking advantage of those. Moving into aero, it looks like all we can do is take away that big wing. Hey, you might want to do it if you want a more classic Viper look, but I will definitely be keeping that on. And then for some conversions and swaps, we can do the racing V12 swap, an all-wheel drive swap, and a whole host of the standard super and turbocharger options. Alright, so I don't feel much of a need to make an S1 tune for this. I mean, I'm sure it would be good, but I really need to see this Viper perform in S2, so I will be back with an S2 tune for you guys. Well, I'm disappointed, folks. I wanted to avoid slapping a turbo on the car and go with a supercharger if anything, and I've never swapped an engine in car review history before either, but the stock engine, even with a supercharger fully maxed out, can't hit even near the top of S2. So, because I still feel so much promise in this car, I've gone ahead and swapped in the racing V12 and twin turbocharged it.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy
the Turbo V12s.
Not join them! Bring balance to
the online meta.
Not leave it in darkness!
Alright, let's take this Viper onto the track. Oh my god, this car is so fast. Everything that was good about it in the stock car is just amplified times 10 here. I mean, we're making close to twice the horsepower. Weight is down something like 600 pounds, and we're on wider tires now. I've barely played with the tune here. I mean, I'm almost afraid to touch it. It's so good right out of the box. As you can see scrolling up at the top here right now, all I've really done is lower the ride height a bit, tame the alignment, slightly play with the suspension balance, and then up the diff lock. But this is very close to the stock tune, and it's a complete monster. I mean, I'm stunned. I saw something good in this car early on, but nothing like this. Look at the grip. I'm flat out going like 150 around tight bends, and the Viper isn't even breaking a sweat. Now, this car is still rear-wheel drive, and as such, you've got to manage the throttle, but it's really easy to manage. It holds revs really well, making hairpins a breeze, and corner corrections are a non-issue. It's so stable through corners and braking, and just look how fast it stops. I'm able to brake so late, and it's physics defying. This Viper, I'm gonna say it, I think it's the American Senna, and I'm ashamed that I've never given it the respect it deserves. This car is incredible, and it backs that up with its lap time. Let's pull up the board here, and you can see our fastest time is in a rear-wheel drive Senna, which I drove off-screen for just leaderboard reference. But our fastest time actually in the series is the Nissan R390 at just under 2 minutes 2 seconds. The Dodge Viper ACR though, 2 minutes 0.44. Faster than the Senna. The Viper is so good. In a way, I'd like to think this is symbolic for Horizon 1 standing up to Horizon 4 because those are the cover cars for each game, but let's not dive into that here. Anyway, let's go ahead and move into the Hokie score, and there's a few points I really want to talk about. So starting off right away with looks, you can see I gave it a pretty easy 10 here, and that's not only because it is such a beautiful car. I mean, the body lines are just perfect on it, but it's actually really because I've never seen a car that looks so close to its original iteration 30 years ago and still manages to look so brand new and beautiful by 2020 standards. And that's something that I really think should be applauded. You know, it's easy to make a pretty car, but when you have this really important heritage like you do in the Viper, you don't want to change the look that much, but you also don't want it to kind of look ugly and not age well. The 2016 Viper ACR here though has managed to thread that line perfectly, so that's why it gets a 10. Jumping down to the fun score here, I really wanted to give it a 10, but I had to knock a point because of the bad sound. I mean, it takes away from the fun of driving the car, especially now that I swapped it with that racing V12. Even with the original engine sound, it just wasn't that good. So down to competitive scores here. In its original rear-wheel drive layout, it makes a pretty good drag car. It's still a little bit heavy and sadly a bit underpowered for the classes it's competing in, but you know, it's still a Viper. It is really fast, but there are better options out there. As for rally, surprisingly decent rally car. Not the best, especially, you know, I'm keeping it in rear-wheel drive, but surprisingly decent. Surprisingly not a very decent drift car though. If you do want to drift a Viper, just use the Formula Drift one. And then finally for the online score on the left side of the board here, I'm giving it an 8 because it's just so fast. I mean, you can see it was faster than my Senna. You know, it's tough to grade anything high in an online score when it's still rear-wheel drive because all-wheel drive is just pretty much the meta. But that being said, it's still such a great car, and especially when you're messing around with buddies and doing private races with special restrictions, the Viper makes for a great choice. Moving into the right side of the board for flexibility, we end up with a score of 6, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's a very track-focused car. And then for the style bonus, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. This is such a cool car, and I just feel like a lot of people kind of forget about it. You know, you definitely have diehard Viper fans and everyone knows about the Viper, but I just feel like, especially lately, it has not been in the spotlight. So this is an awesome car to roll up in. And this all leads us to a final score of 70 even, putting it pretty dang high up on the Hokie score leaderboard, taking the number 4 spot. But it could have taken number 1 if the sound was just better. I mean, the lack of customization was fine, you know, it's a built-out track spec car, and it looks crazy, but that sound just kills it for me. And it's a total bummer that it still couldn't hit the top of S2 class, even with the twin-turbo V12 in it, but in a way, it is pretty cool that it still beat the Senna with like 6 PI points to spare. I mean, that's like 100 plus horsepower at S2 class. But anyway, with that said, guys, please check this car out. I will have my tune uploaded, as I always do, under the name Car Review or Review Tune. and race this against your fastest S2 cars and play around a bit more with the tune. I'm definitely going to be doing that as soon as I'm done with this review. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.